Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal beneath the fragile facade of tranquility that veiled Port Charles, a storm was gathering, quiet but relentless, seeded by betrayal, fueled by vengeance, and destined to erupt into chaos. While figures like Jason and Anna clung to their moral compasses, trying to keep the balance of justice intact, Josslyn had already abandoned hers. She had made a choice, calculated, irreversible, and brimming with personal vendetta. Cloaked in the illusion of patriotic duty under the emblem of the WSB, she had begun forging a path not of justice, but of carefully architected destruction. It was a path she once would have never dared tread, but now, with every step deeper into the shadows, Josslyn shed the skin of an innocent girl wronged by circumstance, and emerged as a quiet manipulator, orchestrating a fall from grace unlike any Port Charles had seen before. To her, Sonny was no longer just a controversial power figure. He was a parasite feeding off the suffering of others, the root cause of every wound carved into her family's history. From Carly's ruin to the endless trauma inflicted on those she loved, Josslyn had convinced herself that the origin of all their pain began and ended with him. She didn't see him as a father figure, a protector, or even a man. He was a symbol, one that needed to be shattered. When Natalia died under suspicious and emotionally charged circumstances, most were too grief-stricken or confused to form coherent theories. But Josslyn saw clarity in the chaos. To her, Natalia's death was not an ending but a catalyst. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the perfect storm of instability, emotional vulnerability, and mistrust. She didn't need to fabricate an elaborate lie, she only needed to exploit the existing fractures. And Marco, overwhelmed by grief and desperate for someone to blame, was ripe for manipulation. Josslyn didn't need to utter the words, "Sonny killed her." She only needed to plant the seed, a vague insinuation, a knowing glance, a well-timed sigh. She leaked carefully curated fragments of information, that Natalia had planned to confront Sonny, that she had been visibly distraught after speaking with one of his men, that Sonny had a violent outburst just hours before she was found dead. These weren't outright lies, but neither were they truths. Then came the video. It was short, grainy, and lacking context, but in Marco's fragile state, it was damning. In the clip, Sonny was pacing, enraged, shouting threats into the air, his words harsh, ominous, his tone unmistakably venomous. Josslyn pretended to be shocked when she accidentally played it on her phone in front of Marco. She let the image fester in his mind until it transformed into certainty. Consumed by rage and sorrow, Marco began to act recklessly, believing he was honoring his mother by seeking retribution. His first move was subtle but destructive, sabotaging a key logistics hub that Sonny's organization relied on for international movement of assets. The hit cost Sonny hundreds of thousands of dollars and forced him to rework his entire defensive infrastructure. It was a calculated blow. But Marco didn't know that his hand had been guided by Josslyn and that his pain had been weaponized for her war. Sidwell, meanwhile, watched from the shadows. Though he never gave Marco a direct order, he made no move to stop the boy's crusade. Having Josslyn manipulate the grieving son of Natalia served his interests perfectly, and he allowed Brenna, his trusted operative, to subtly feed Josslyn the intelligence she needed. Brenna, expert in psychological warfare, connected the dots between Sonny's current vulnerabilities, Marco's emotional volatility, and Josslyn's seething vendetta. She gave Josslyn access to encrypted communications, internal maps, and behavioral patterns of Sonny's men. With these tools, Josslyn built her plan piece by piece, not to kill Sonny physically, but to kill what he stood for. Every mistake Marco made, every risk he took under false belief, was another crack in Sonny's empire. All the while, Carly remained blissfully ignorant of the monster her daughter was becoming. Preoccupied with her own battles, Jason's rising tensions with Anna, the PR disaster of Sonny's questionable investments in deception, and her efforts to shield what remained of her family's integrity, she failed to see the storm brewing within Josslyn. She still spoke of her daughter as a beacon of justice, a strong young woman fighting for truth within the WSB. She was proud of Josslyn's ambition, blind to the fact that her daughter had replaced conviction with vengeance. Carly continued to support Sonny publicly, clashing with Tracy and others who warned her that being near Sonny was dangerous. In truth, she was clinging to the idea that Sonny was still the protector he once claimed to be. Little did she know that the enemy Sonny feared most wasn't outside the gate. It was her own daughter, standing beside him with a dagger hidden in her WSB credentials. Jason began to feel the unease first. He couldn't explain it, but the pattern of attacks against Sonny didn't feel like the work of Sidwell alone. There was a chaos to it, a rawness that suggested personal emotion rather than tactical strategy. As he reviewed security footage and tracked the movements of Marco, he noticed inconsistencies. Unexplained access points, gaps in communication that only someone on the inside could exploit. Anna, too, started asking questions when she learned that Selena had been framed and driven out of Port Charles by rumors and coincidences that felt too perfectly timed. She began to suspect a third party was pulling the strings. Someone operating just beneath the radar, using others like chess pieces. She didn't have proof, but her instincts whispered the name, Josslyn. Meanwhile, Vaughn played a double-edged game of his own. To Josslyn, he presented himself as an ally, someone who shared her mission and admired her fire. He encouraged her to aim higher in WSB, to take Sonny down and make a name for herself. But Vaughn wasn't driven by justice, he was driven by control. Every kiss, every whispered plan, was another way to keep Josslyn tethered to him. He had watched how rage transformed her, how grief fueled her ambition, and he saw potential in her chaos. He wasn't in love, he was recruiting. Whether for Sidwell, for himself, or for a larger game, Vaughn remained a wild card, and Josslyn was too consumed by her cause to notice. At the epicenter of it all, Sonny stood surrounded by enemies he couldn't see, trying to outplay Sidwell while unknowingly being outmaneuvered from within. With Selena exiled, Marco weaponized, and his organization bleeding from unseen wounds, Sonny began to lose the composure that had once made him feared. He lashed out, made rash decisions, and slowly began to alienate those who had remained loyal. He didn't yet know that the source of his unraveling wasn't Sidwell or the PCPD or even Tracy, it was Josslyn, the girl he once protected, the girl he never saw coming. As the walls closed in around him, and as Port Charles braced for a war none of them fully understood, Josslyn stood atop the wreckage of her creation, unblinking. The city saw her as a rising force for good within the WSB. Vaughn saw her as a tool. Brenna saw her as a weapon. But Josslyn saw herself as the avenger of a broken legacy. And if the truth ever came out, if Carly learned what her daughter had done, if Marco realized he had been manipulated, if Jason traced the chaos back to her, it wouldn't stop her. Because in her mind, justice had already been served. The fall of Sonny wasn't just a mission. It was personal. It was inevitable. And it had only just begun. The situation escalated rapidly as Anna summoned Marco for formal questioning, suspecting that his role in the chaos surrounding Natalia's death was far from innocent. Though the initial investigation had painted Marco as a grieving son overwhelmed by loss, Anna's instincts told her otherwise. As she delved deeper into the timeline and began cross-referencing surveillance, digital traces, and eyewitness accounts, a disturbing pattern emerged, one that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. The first red flag was Marco's unauthorized presence at one of Sonny's off-the-book storage facilities just hours before a major disruption in operations. Anna discovered through city security feeds that Marco had used a falsified contractor badge to gain access, moving suspiciously through the warehouse before a scheduled shipment inexplicably failed to arrive. That alone might have been dismissed as reckless grief, but further investigation revealed that Marco had been in contact with known associates of Sidwell, individuals believed to be low-level operatives in a larger criminal network with ties to sabotage, data leaks, and trafficking. Anna, alarmed, confronted Marco directly. During interrogation, his composure faltered. His voice cracked when asked what he was doing at the warehouse. His eyes flickered with panic when she showed him a blurred image of him exchanging something with a man known to work under Sidwell's chain of command. Yet, even cornered, Marco didn't confess. Instead, he fell back on emotion, on righteous anger, on the weight of a son mourning a mother he claimed had been destroyed by Sonny. He painted a picture of a tyrant who had manipulated, threatened, and ultimately driven Natalia to her death. He claimed that even without proof, the truth was self-evident, that Sonny had orchestrated something that pushed his mother past the point of no return. But Anna wasn't convinced. His outrage seemed sincere, but there was a haze of confusion behind it, as if he believed what he was saying, but had been led there by a subtle, persistent force. That was when a new theory took root in Anna's mind. Marco was not the mastermind. He was a pawn, emotionally hijacked and manipulated into becoming a saboteur for someone else's agenda. The breadcrumbs she had been following, digital manipulation, strategic misdirection, psychological warfare, didn't align with Sidwell's usual brash tactics. They bore the signature of someone more personal, someone with access, someone young, idealistic, and angry. Someone like Josslyn. Anna had once seen promise in Josslyn. She was the prototypical recruit for the WSB. Brilliant, driven, and unshaken by danger. But in hindsight, Anna realized that the fire in Josslyn's eyes was not ambition, it was vengeance. And while Anna lacked hard evidence, the circumstantial alignment was chilling. Josslyn had grown closer to Vaughn at lightning speed. She had access to sensitive WSB intel. She had a long, unresolved emotional history with Sonny. And now, as Anna reanalyzed the timing of the leaks, the tactical missteps of Sonny's organization, and Marco's transformation, every path led to Josslyn as the hidden catalyst. Jason, meanwhile, had been conducting his own quiet investigation. Known for his ability to read people better than any cop or agent, he had noticed early on that Marco's grief didn't follow a natural rhythm. It seemed constantly fed, redirected, almost curated. The stories Marco told didn't always align, and his rage appeared too calculated for someone supposedly acting out of spontaneous anguish. More troubling, Jason began observing inconsistencies in Vaughn's behavior. Vaughn, while playing the role of charismatic operative, asked far too many questions about Sonny's vulnerabilities, yet never seemed invested in helping mitigate the damage. Even more telling, Josslyn and Vaughn appeared almost choreographed in their interactions. Rarely together in public, yet always aligned in timing and reaction. Jason began to suspect that the true assault on Sonny's empire wasn't coming from the outside. It was being coordinated from within. At Windmere, Sidwell had begun revealing the full extent of his ambitions. Unlike past adversaries who sought to break Sonny with brute force, Sidwell opted for psychological annihilation. He wanted Sonny dismantled piece by piece. His allies scattered, his finances crippled, his family turned against him. And to achieve that, he needed diversions. He needed to keep the likes of Jason, Carly, and Anna looking in the wrong direction. That's when he unleashed his most effective tactic, a false intelligence leak implicating Selena as the orchestrator behind Natalia's death and the Charlie's pub bombing. The leak was planted with surgical precision, using real data intercepted from an unrelated smuggling operation to make it appear as though Selena was trying to usurp control. Anna, unwilling to risk the city's fragile balance, redirected the majority of her investigative resources towards Selena. Chase, trusting Anna's judgment and seeing the pattern unfold, joined the effort. Under pressure, Selena was boxed into a corner and ultimately forced to leave Port Charles. Her departure, however, was not a surrender, it was a silent condemnation, a bitter retreat made without resistance, because she knew she had been outmaneuvered. She knew someone had set her up, but without proof, all she could do was vanish before she became the next corpse in the city's escalating war. While chaos unfolded on multiple fronts, Tracy remained laser-focused on the moral rut she believed was eating away at Port Charles, Sonny's unchecked power. In her eyes, Natalia's death was just the latest casualty in a long line of cover-ups, shady dealings, and corrupt alliances. Determined to make a case against him, Tracy intensified her campaign to expose Sonny's financial misdeeds, particularly the illicit channels he used to funnel money into the deception enterprise. The deeper she dug, the more connections she found, and with every document, every account transfer, she added more weight to her cause. And now, with Natalia's death turning public sentiment, Tracy found her justification strengthened. She argued that it wasn't just criminal, it was morally abhorrent for someone like Sonny to be in the lives of young men like Gio. She lobbied to have Gio removed from Sonny's circle entirely, claiming that proximity to him meant grooming the next generation of corruption. Unbeknownst to her, the strings she was tugging were connected to the very web Josslyn had spun. And while Tracy believed she was delivering justice from a place of integrity, she was, in fact, advancing a masterfully veiled vendetta, one that had already sunk its hooks into Marco, deceived Vaughn, outmaneuvered Anna, and was now quietly poisoning every relationship Sonny had left. The city of Port Charles, unaware, stood on the brink of implosion, not from war or brute force, but from betrayal, the slow, deliberate, and devastating kind that starts at home. Outside Charlie's pub, once a warm, bustling cornerstone of community and reunion, now lay nothing more than the charred remains of a violent tragedy. The air still carried the bitter tang of smoke, mingling with the stench of ash and regret. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the wind like a mocking banner, a symbol of a city coming undone. Where laughter and clinking glasses had once echoed, there was now silence. An eerie, suffocating quiet that seemed to stretch endlessly through the streets of Port Charles. The walls that remained upright were scorched and hollow, and the sidewalk outside was still marked with dark stains no amount of rain could wash away. But amid the devastation, one figure remained disturbingly still, Josslyn. She stood several feet from the twisted remnants of the bar, her gaze locked on the rubble with a detached calm, as if the destruction was something to be studied rather than mourned. Her eyes, cold, calculating, hollowed of innocence, scanned the scene not with sorrow, but with an almost mechanical clarity. Every crack in the foundation, every broken windowpane, every collapsed beam, each was a testament to the power shift she had orchestrated from behind a polished badge and rehearsed smiles. For others, this place had been a haven. For Josslyn, it had always been a lie, a stage on which Sonny played the benevolent king while shadows crawled beneath his empire. Now, in flames, that illusion had been erased. She felt no remorse, no guilt, no hesitation. Only a chilling sense of inevitability. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a reckoning. To Josslyn, the damage Sonny now endured, the loss of trust, the crumbling of his network, the questions whispered in hallways once filled with loyalty, wasn't a consequence of bad luck. It was justice. Earned. Deserved. Inevitable. The betrayals he had inflicted over the years, the people he'd manipulated and cast aside, the lives ruined by proximity to his name, this was the debt finally being collected. Every blow to his reputation, every tear from a grieving family, every accusation hurled his way was, to her, a small step toward redemption. Not for Sonny, but for everyone else he had left broken in his wake. Then Vaughn approached from the shadows, his presence as sudden as it was calculated. Without a word, without even waiting for a signal, he reached for her, pulling her into a kiss beneath the dim, flickering remnants of the street lamp. It was swift, forceful, and disturbingly intimate. To an outsider, it may have looked romantic, an impulsive expression of emotion between two operatives standing at the epicenter of history. But to Josslyn, it was something else entirely. A confirmation. A code. A signal between co-conspirators that the game had officially shifted to a new level. It wasn't about affection, trust, or connection. It was about power. About control. About domination disguised as chemistry. In that kiss, Vaughn didn't offer love, he offered allegiance to her cause, however dangerous it might become. And she, in return, didn't offer warmth, only consent to continue playing the part. Their alliance, forged in mutual ambition and distrust, had long since moved past the lines of morality. There were no heroes here, only players, each with their own script. And now, with Charlie's pub reduced to ashes, with Sidwell pulling strings from Windmere, and Marco spiraling deeper into manipulation, the stage was set for a crescendo of consequences that none of them could fully control. Over the next few weeks, the truth would begin to surface. Slowly, agonizingly, in fragments too jagged to ignore. Jason would start to unravel the inconsistencies in the reports, tracing the digital fingerprints left behind by someone within the WSB. Anna would revisit her doubts about the orchestration of events and question whether Vaughn's arrival in Port Charles had been a coincidence or a carefully placed disruption. Carly, increasingly torn between her loyalty to Sonny and her faith in her daughter, would start to see cracks in Josslyn's carefully cultivated persona. And Marco, tormented by the grief that had been weaponized against him, would begin to question whether he had been avenging his mother, or delivering her legacy into the hands of those who used her as a pawn. As all of these threads converged, one unavoidable question loomed larger than ever: would Sonny see the truth before it was too late? Would he recognize that the betrayal wasn't from his enemies, but from those he once considered untouchable? Would he understand that the foundation of his empire wasn't crumbling from the outside in, but from the inside out? Josslyn didn't care. She had stopped caring a long time ago. In her eyes, Sonny had never been the hero Port Charles claimed he was. He was a tyrant cloaked in charisma, a manipulator wrapped in tailored suits and whispered threats. And now, at last, he was being brought to his knees. Not by violence.